It's almost the most wonderful time of the year. Giving Tuesday is just around the corner, and to celebrate, GiveButter is giving back $25,000 to nonprofits. GiveButter is the easiest to use, all-in-one nonprofit fundraising platform that brings together everything changemakers need to raise more, pay less, and give better. From free fundraising pages, events, and auctions to a built-in CRM, modern marketing features, and so much more. And this year, the 5 most engaging Giving Tuesday campaigns on GiveButter will each receive a $5,000 matching donation that you can use to multiply your impact. So get the full spread on GiveButter Gives Back for Giving Tuesday and learn more at givebutter.com/nonprofit-nation. That's givebutter.com/nonprofit-nation. I'm so excited to see what you come up with. On to the show. Hello, and welcome to Nonprofit Nation. I'm your host, Julia Campbell, and I'm going to sit down with nonprofit industry experts, fundraisers, marketers, and everyone in between to get real and discuss what it takes to build that movement that you've been dreaming of. I created the Nonprofit Nation podcast to share practical wisdom and strategies to help you confidently find your voice, definitively grow your audience, and effectively build your movement. If you're a nonprofit newbie or an experienced professional who's looking to get more visibility, reach more people, and create even more impact, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello. Hi, everyone. This is Nonprofit Nation with your host, Julia Campbell. Today, we have one of my absolute favorite topics, nonprofit storytelling, more specifically, the art and ethics of nonprofit storytelling with Carly Euler. And Carly is the creative force behind MemoryFox's 2023 Ethical Storytelling Report. And she has experience with multiple nonprofits, from working with youth development at the Wily Network to community fundraising at the Breast Cancer Coalition. Carly knows how storytelling can engage, inspire, and empower. And today we're going to talk about some out-of-the-box storytelling techniques, some practical ways to collect stories, and the fine line that we all walk to ensure that our storytelling remains ethical and authentic. And Carly, this is a long time coming, so I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to Nonprofit Nation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This topic is so interesting, and I know we've talked about it, when we've been in person together. So it's kind of exciting to get it, recorded and out for people to hear our conversation.
Right. And we both have husbands named Evan, just as a side note. So today, we're talking about nonprofit storytelling, but I want to ask you, how did you become the champion of storytelling that you are today? Tell me a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, definitely. So my journey, I think probably like most people's, you didn't really end up exactly where you thought you might.
Sort of, yeah, accidental. We're all, right? A lot of us are accidental.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually was a lacrosse player in college. And when I graduated, I thought I'd be a lacrosse coach. I kind of thought that was where my life was going to take me. And I did that for a few years and I really liked it. But then I sort of realized that the thing I really liked about coaching was actually getting to know my players and getting them involved with their majors, getting them involved in the community, like learning about like how they can become better people and how I could help support that.
You are a connector.
Yeah. So I ended up basically kind of getting out of coaching and getting into nonprofit work. It just seemed like a nice transition. And then when I moved to Virginia and I got a job at a military nonprofit, and while I was there, I actually heard about MemoryFox and I became a MemoryFox customer. So I started storytelling really early on in my nonprofit career with MemoryFox. And it was just so interesting to be able to have a way that we could really ask the people we were serving, like our veterans, our military caregivers, our sponsors, just to submit some videos, some photos, some things of that we could see how our mission was impacting them, or, maybe how their life has changed. Or it was just so interesting to get in at MemoryFox really from kind of the ground up. And then, fast forward, 9 years or so, I ended up being invited to come join the team and really just be kind of a voice for nonprofit storytelling because, I was kind of doing it.
First of all, where did you live in Virginia? Because I used to live in Norfolk, Virginia.
Oh, I used to live in Alexandria.
Okay. And I agree. I think I love the transition from coaching, because so much of coaching is telling a great story. Yeah. You have to communicate with parents and administrators and the school and the students, and you have to keep all these balls in the air, but you also have to tell a great story of, why sports are important and why practice is important and what this can lead to. So I do see that. I think there's that natural through line. And my daughter plays volleyball, and I completely can see that in the communication that they're doing. It's really the story of the sport, what it does for you, how it can help impact your life, and just the stories also of teammates and just the story of the whole team. I think that's amazing.
Completely agree. So I'll be the first to tell you, I am not a phenomenal athlete. I wasn't some standout great athlete.
My kids are good athletes, but I'm not.
Oh my gosh. But I probably am one of the people who has gotten the most out of the sport because of all of those other things around it. So I definitely was not scoring all the goals or making all the right passes, or definitely not save. It wasn't a goalie. It wasn't going to be saving the game. But, when you think about how sports impact your life long-term, the connections you make, the stories you tell, just the community that you build, I definitely feel like I've gotten the most out of lacrosse compared, I don't know, than maybe some of the best athletes I've ever played the game, honestly.
Exactly. It's about community, and it's about friendships. It's about experiencing new things. I mean, it really is not about, winning the Olympic medal, because 0.00000% of us actually make it professional or, win the Olympic medal. So what are some of the most creative or out of the box storytelling techniques that you have seen in your career that you've seen nonprofits use effectively?
Yes. So I love this question because, that there's kind of this traditional way of thinking about nonprofit storytelling, and it's that you kind of collect a story from, a beneficiary, someone that who has been impacted by your mission, and then you take it and you use it to raise funds. But I kind of now, especially working at MemoryFox, seeing all of the examples, I think a lot of people don't really think about all the different inputs that you possibly could get, which could be a part of a story, and all the different outputs that they also could help. So what I mean by that is we obviously want to keep collecting stories from our program participants, but we also want to get stories from our donors, our volunteers, our board members, our leadership team, our corporate sponsors. Mm-hmm. And then we want to take all of those, and your staff, of course, your staff have some of the best stories. And we want to take all of those and also think about the different outputs. I think nonprofit storytelling, the way that social media is, right? That's, your whole bread and butter. It's not just about raising funds. It's actually mostly not about raising funds, right? It's about educating people about your mission, or educating people about what programs you actually are performing. It's also about actually performing your mission sometimes. If you have an advocacy piece or an awareness piece to your mission, it's such a massive thing that you can do with stories from all different perspectives that can lead to all different outcomes. So you asked for specific examples, right? So one example that I love to talk about came from our friends at the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. So what they did is it was during the pandemic, and they have a public health focus as part of their mission. And they realized that their community had all of these questions, we all did, right? But they had questions about the vaccine, about they were hesitant. They were hesitant about what to believe, what to go to. So what they did was they actually captured the questions from their community on video, and they took those questions and they sent them to doctors in the area that they trusted. And then they put those together in one cohesive YouTube video that they sent out to their community. And it's easy to say like people may have gotten a vaccine anyway, but there was a correlation between that video being released and people watching the video to a massive increase in them having people come to their pop-up locations where they were giving out vaccines. So it's just an example of using storytelling in a new way to really perform your mission. It's such a powerful thing that you can do.
I do a lot of work with my friend Josh Hirsch, who I think you know. He was the director of development and marketing for Susan G. Komen in Florida during the pandemic. And something that their chapter did is they did a lot of storytelling because, as you can imagine, getting a breast cancer diagnosis is completely disrupting. But also, if you are going through treatment and there's a pandemic, what do you do? Who do you turn to? What's going on? So they did a lot of Q&A and a lot of live streams with experts, but they also just did a lot of storytelling. This is what we're going through. This is what someone is going through. Like no one has lived through this kind of pandemic like in our lifetime. You know, it humanizes the mission and it helps people really relate and process complex information. Because I think a lot of the times we're thrown so much data. Yeah. We are consuming so much information. I think of the podcasts I listen to that talk about headlines and talk about like the war in Ukraine or talk about, something else going on. And it's the stories that really humanize it and make it more, I don't really want to say palatable, but more understandable.
Yeah. And it's the stories that make people realize that they're closer to your mission than they may have thought they were, or they're closer to your community, or they have more things in common with maybe the people you serve than they maybe originally thought they did. It's just a great way to really draw connections for people.
So I want to move on to story collection strategies, because this is something that I do talk about a lot with my clients, like in my work. But I'm always so interested because I'm always learning, especially from people on the ground, like people that actually, are dealing with nonprofits at scale. So can you share some of your tips for nonprofits that really struggle with collecting stories, especially from like a diverse range of stakeholders?
Definitely. So yeah, this is a huge barrier for a lot of nonprofits. It's a huge barrier for us sometimes too, right? There are definitely things that you have to put in motion to make it easier. I would say one thing we recommend is it kind of starts with backing up one step and saying, well, I need to make sure I'm building a culture of storytelling at my organization.
Building that culture. Okay.
Yeah, so people feel like it's a two-way conversation when you're talking with your donors, when you're talking with your program participants. We want to hear from them more often so they're more comfortable when you do have a specific ask for something, for an interview or for a video. You want people to be able to feel like, oh, this is just an everyday thing. We talk about this stuff all the time. Then they feel more comfortable sharing. So sort of taking one step back and trying to build as an organization more of a culture of storytelling, which sounds, maybe it sounds a little easier the way I'm wording it than it probably is, but it is important to like make it known that this is something we want to prioritize. So that's sort of like step one, I would say. And then I would say a lot of times we have in-person fundraising events, or we have programs that take part in person, and maybe we have a photo booth set up. That's kind of a common thing that people see, or they see an area where people will take photos. As a suggestion, we want to say, why don't you think about that as a story booth instead? Have an iPad there where people can record an actual answer and send that to you directly. Something that they can do in real time when they're feeling those emotions in real time. That's so important. Then, if you think that that's still maybe too far of a stretch for your organization, which it likely could be, we highly recommend that when you have, especially an in-person fundraising event, have somebody that's literally your content collection champion. It's their only job that day. So that is the only thing they want to be thinking about. They'll need to know the timeline. They'll need to know all the people you want to get the stories from. They'll need to know the types of stories you're looking for. But when you put someone in charge of that and make that really something they can own, that's when you're going to get the majority of content that you really can use in the future. So I don't know, a content collection champion, usually you might say, oh, well, our communications person will handle that, right? They'll take care of that. But you and I both know when you get to an event like that, you get drawn in like 7 different directions at one time. And all of a sudden you didn't take any photos or videos.
And if you're the content creator, you're probably the event planner as well. So you probably have to deal with some fire burning down,
Exactly. And then afterwards, you're going to say to yourself, oh, I didn't catch a video of that. Oh, I didn't get a photo of that. And you're going to be upset with yourself. But if you instead find a volunteer, maybe somebody a little younger, a little more used to their technology, really educate them on what you're looking for, and especially like a timeline, right? Like a deadline of when they need to find all of these things for you. And then you're going to find success because you're really going to let them own it.
I agree with you. I remember, speaking of Virginia, when I lived in Virginia, I was the director of development at a domestic violence organization. And I sort of like came in hot, and I emailed everyone on the staff and said, okay, I need some stories for the newsletter. Right. I need some stories for social media. And no one responded. How can we build this culture of storytelling and get more of our already burned out, probably already incredibly stressed out team members involved in this process?
Yeah, we get this question a lot. Somebody in your position says, I know I need more stories. I know we have them, but I can't get my program team to introduce me to people, or I can't get them to send me along a story that they collected. That is something that people are dealing with a lot. And I do recognize, of course, we don't want to put more work on the program staff, of course, because they're really busy and they're doing really good boots on the ground work. So we want to recognize that. But I would say probably the first part of like making sure that you have that culture of storytelling, or even culture of ethical storytelling, is letting them know upfront what the process looks like on your end, right? If I collect a story this way, these are the ways I'm going to share it. These are the ways that I'm planning to talk to others about this story. This is where I'm going to post it, or how often I'm going to post it. So then they feel like that you're going to be a good story steward, and therefore they'll feel more likely to pass those stories along. I also think that we need to remind our program staff that stories really do raise more funds, and more funds do help their programs, right? So if we're all going to agree to be on the same team on this ethical storytelling journey, or just on this story collection journey, it is going to be better outcomes for the program. So we just need to make sure that we're all on the same page, bring them into the process, let them know all of the options of what it might look like later. They're going to be more likely to hopefully introduce you to people, or even capture those stories themselves for you.
I completely agree. I think when you say something to a staff member, we need a story, they are thinking, oh, a 10-minute video.
Right.
And I need the entire life story of this person. I need to put them on camera. I'm going to exploit them. It's going, they start spiraling. And I think that's probably due to things they've seen online, or maybe in my case, it was due to a lack of trust with the former director of development. So I had to build that trust with this team, help them understand, like you said, exactly what I'm talking about. Like, it could just be a bunch of kids playing Uno and taking a photo and saying, this is, we're playing Uno. And it's not necessarily this huge undertaking that I feel like when we say storytelling or collecting a story, it turns into. So do you have any story prompts or questions that you use that you find can kind of consistently generate like a meaningful response, or at least be a seed sown in the storytelling journey?
Yeah, definitely. So we have this premise, like, you can't get a good story if you don't ask a good question.
Right.
That's what every interviewer that you see on the news does, right? They ask great questions. That's how they get to the good stuff. And I think, especially when it comes to nonprofit storytelling, That is super, super important because like you were just saying, the people that you might be talking to, even if that is a staff member or a board member or a volunteer, they're nervous. They're probably feeling a little nervous that they might sound silly or their answer might not be what you're looking for. They're going to feel a little stressed out by that. But when you ask them a question that is targeted enough that's going to actually elicit the answer you're looking for, that's going to be the way that you're going to make them feel more comfortable. So for example, you don't just want to go to someone and say, okay, tell me your story.
Where do you start with that? What story do you want? I have 10 billion of them.
Right.
That's
we could start
so
at first.
overwhelming.
Hear about where I grew up. Like, what are you really asking? You might instead want to say, tell me about the first time you heard about our organization. What did that feel like? Maybe then they're going to tell you that they felt relief or that they felt hope or that they felt like maybe somebody else understood what they were going through. Something like that is going to get you. First of all, it's going to make them feel less stressed. They're going to have a direction to go in, but it's also actually going to get you, the nonprofit professional, the answer that you are actually trying to get out of them. So that's just one example, but yeah, a really nice targeted question that it feels easy to reply back to.
Yes. And what I tell my clients is just like you said, focus on the feeling, not necessarily the what happened.
Right.
Because I think some stories, it's Julia lost her job. She went to the food bank. She received services and she left. That's more just a recounting of what happened. It's not really a story. So there needs to be some conflict or there needs to be some of what I felt, what I experienced that's going to really bring it in and humanize it for people. And I mean, that's just the art. That is the art of storytelling. One thing I want to talk about, one key takeaway from the ethical storytelling report, and I'm going to put a link in the show notes so everyone can grab a copy of that. The challenge of balancing impactful storytelling with, showing respect for those being featured. And this is a constant tension. I know that you and MemoryFox deal with this all the time, and I deal with this all the time. How can nonprofits manage this tension?
Yes, this question it's a tough one. I mean, there definitely is not one answer, which, we as nonprofit professionals, you're so busy. You wish there was just like something that you could do that would be absolutely sure that you are representing your community in the way they want to be represented, right? Like something easy. And unfortunately, I don't have one easy thing to share with you, but I have some kind of guidelines that I sourced from the report from all of our contributors. So first, I talked a little bit about this already, but being upfront with your storyteller about their options for anonymity or about their options for where something can be shared, or even the timeline of when you're going to share the story, when you might retire the story, when you might be looking for an update. Something like that is going to immediately make someone who's thinking about telling their story, they might say, okay, I fully understand the process, therefore I feel like I'm a part of the process. And they're less likely to feel exploited when you give them and make them feel like they're a part of the process. So that's kind of one strategy. Another strategy that I love that so many people mentioned in the report is to always, always go back to that storyteller before you publish the story and get that final yes. And sometimes even a no. And we have to be okay with our no's as well, right? We have to be okay, even if I put all this time and effort into this story, we do have to be okay with if they finally say no, okay, we don't share this story, or we find a way where we can edit it so it is approved by our storyteller. The last thing you want to do is publish a story that was not approved in its final form and have them come back to you and say, I feel like I was misrepresented, or I actually don't like the way that you talked about my family or my community or where I'm from. That is not a situation you want to be in, especially because I know, nonprofit professionals, we want to help people. We don't want to feel like we've put them in a harmful position. And then finally, this is, again, something that I think came up in pretty much every answer that was in the ethical storytelling report. But it really does come down to consent, and on top of that, informed consent. So making sure, again, they understand the process. They understand really what they're agreeing to, and kind of maybe all of the risks or all of the liabilities that might be associated with having a story, put on the internet where you really can't ever fully take it fully down. So just a few strategies there for you that might help kind of overcome some of those really big questions, those really big barriers.
I think my key takeaways from that is just having this culture of trust and transparency at your nonprofit. You cannot be effectively gathering or telling stories if staff members do not trust each other. And we've all been in organizations like that. And if there is not that inherent trust and people relying on each other and knowing that everyone has the best interests of the clients, of the mission at heart, then none of this is going to work. So that's kind of like the very first thing that needs to be occurring.
And you already touched on this as well. You went to an organization where you were coming in on a lack of trust.
Yes.
So we also like to recommend that as an organization, you consider building an ethical storytelling standards guide.
Ooh, yes. Talk about this.
So when you have an ethical storytelling standards guide, that's going to help kind of bridge that trust between your staff members, as well as when somebody inevitably does leave your organization, it's going to happen and new people will come in. Your new people can be onboarded into what you're already doing. It's so important to just let everybody know up front, hey, this is how we talk about our organization. These are terms we no longer use. Even if we did in the past, we're not doing it anymore. And even provide some examples for people that say, hey, in this situation, if you're asked this question, here's how we as an organization talk about our brand. So this might sound, maybe at a nonprofit, this sounds a little like it's a lot of work, or maybe it's kind of controlling, like I'm telling people what to say. But for-profit brands have been doing this for decades, right? They have very strict rules on what can be said, what can't be said, what can be shown. It's kind of just catching up with that, but putting an ethical spin to that as well.
I completely agree. And everyone rebrands. I'm thinking of an organization where I live in Salem called HAWC, HAWC. It used to be called Help for Abused Women and Children. And then, of course, there are multiple studies that show that not only women and children are in abusive relationships and being abused. And so they did a rebrand and a whole guide on how we talk about the issue and how we want to present this issue to the public. I think it's super important. And I really do believe having everyone on the same page, like, are we going to say the word vulnerable? Are we going to say the word impoverished? Like, there are certain words that I know a lot of nonprofits have kind of done away with, but understanding that, kind of having everyone embrace the new, we can't just, if we're around for 100 years, we have to be able to change and adapt, and our stories need to change and adapt as well.
Yes. I mean, just like when you come into a new organization, you might say, oh, I have some new fundraising strategies I want to try. I have maybe a new social media platform I want to get us on, or I want to try video storytelling more than you've ever done in the past. Just like that, we also can make changes about our language or on our website, or like you said, even rebranding if that language no longer serves us or feels like it's part of our community anymore. I think that's a great point.
Well, let's talk about video storytelling. I want to talk about MemoryFox. We've talked about it a lot, and I'm not sure if my listeners are familiar. So tell us about MemoryFox and the features and services that you provide.
Yeah, so MemoryFox is a technology tool that helps nonprofits collect stories directly from their community. So that does include video, it does include photo, written testimonials, really just what people are willing and able to share with you. It has the capability to be uploaded directly to the nonprofit. So then from there, the nonprofit has a story bank where they can organize their stories based on what makes sense for them as an organization. And then we help you share your stories in the most compelling way. We're integrated with Canva, of course. We're huge Canva fans over here. So all of your videos and photos can directly go right into your Canva documents, your annual reports, whatever you're making in Canva. And we also have a few other options that help with the sharing portion, like story pages, integrations with social media channels. But really, it's just a way to collect the story directly from your community without having to send out an interview crew or send out a videographer. It's a sort of a DIY way to collect stories.
How can we incentivize people? This is, I guarantee you, a question you get all the time because I get this as well. How can you incentivize people and get them excited about sharing their story on a platform like this?
We do get that question a lot. I mean, you can ask our nonprofits, well, if you do have something that you feel would be a good actual physical incentive for people, maybe it's a gift card, maybe it's some sort of swag. You know, people like to try to win something or be a part of a raffle of some sort. But I think in general, when it comes to getting people excited to share their story, it kind of comes down to them feeling comfortable doing it. And, you know, we already talked about building trust with your community. So it's sort of just making them feel like, oh, my story is going to be used in this way, which will be helpful for this organization that I care so much about. And therefore, they're going to be more likely to share their story. Again, that does also come down to making those great questions, though, that feel easy to answer or that feel within reach of answering without spending too much time or without putting them out too much.
Using Susan G. Komen as an example, I've seen them share story prompts.
Yeah.
So tell us about your diagnosis, or tell us how your family felt, or tell us your biggest win, like prompts that people can use. I think that is such a great idea. I
also think that I know I've seen Susan G. Komen do this before. You share a story and then you ask for a reply, right? So basically you're showing, hey, this is somebody else that was willing to share this story, or I'm on staff and I have a story to share. And now I'm asking you, okay, what about your diagnosis? And therefore, when people can see, I think many times when people can see an example of kind of what you're looking for or what you are interested in collecting, they understand better how they can help and what they can submit to you.
I love an example. I love examples. And when I work with clients, I constantly am sharing examples of this is what I'm talking about. This is what another organization in your vertical did. This is an example of storytelling that is protecting confidentiality, because I think that is a huge piece of it. If people think storytelling has to be the client facing the camera, and it could be a staff member telling the story, it could be a donor telling the story. So let's talk a little bit about confidentiality and what are some strategies nonprofits can use if they actually can't tell client stories front facing.
Yeah, this is something we get a lot because, of course, when it comes to ethical storytelling, we do want to recognize that not everyone is comfortable on camera. Not everyone can be on camera, perhaps out of fear, or they just really don't want their face associated with their story. But they might want to share something because they know that there are other people experiencing the same things, or they want to connect with others. So it's a really tough question, but I do think that sort of comes back to, in your ethical storytelling standards guide, having some parameters of what you consider an anonymous story. So maybe at your organization, you change names, you do not include location, maybe you do not include, other factors that might be identifying in a written story, for example. And as long as you have a policy behind that and you make sure you stick to that. I say that because I've been at an organization before where we said we were going to change a name, and then we did, but then somebody else didn't know if the name had been changed yet. So it was changed again, and it was changed again. And there was no communication about who was in charge or who was really going to say, okay, this is in its final stages. So really having a standards guide is very important for something like that. But in terms of, you asked about stories that somebody won't want to appear their face on camera. I think it's still so compelling to get a written testimonial and ask, would you be okay if my voice told your story? Would you be okay if I shared your story over top of these other images of our mission in action? Something like that can still feel like a really compelling way to view a story and listen to a story, as well as show somebody's story who's not willing to personally tell it themselves.
I completely agree. Carly, this is fantastic. How can people find the ethical storytelling report? I will put it in the show notes, but how can they find more about you, MemoryFox, and connect with you?
Yes, I would love for everyone to get their copy of the Ethical Storytelling Report. I learned so much putting it together. I feel like I could just burst with information that I want to share all the time, but I would rather you read it yourself so you can get your own information. But that can be found at MemoryFox.io. That's our website. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm posting on there pretty often, so you can find me on LinkedIn. And also, going back to practicing what you preach, I'm on TikTok. Find me on TikTok. I'm Carly. Yeah, I'm Carly_MemFox.
I will follow you. I'm writing that down.
I post little fundraising tips. I like to post things about ethical storytelling. So I think that, again, if you're looking for some examples of how to tell stories, maybe to a camera, find me on TikTok.
Oh, that's great. That was a question I should have asked you about. What storytelling platforms do you like for nonprofits? TikTok is a great one.
I think there's a lot of potential in TikTok, and people aren't necessarily, they're kind of being a little slow to capturing it. I don't want anyone to get on something if they don't feel comfortable trying it, but TikTok's kind of a strange one where you really do have to go head first and give it a try. If you want to gain a following, you just have to keep trying.
No, I agree. I don't really post. I just kind of skulk around on TikTok, but I think it is great for those short form videos. And really, like you said, just to humanize what you're doing, to put a face to a cause, to get a wider following, a younger following. So thank you. So yeah, Carly_MemFox.
Yes.
On TikTok. I will put all of these in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here today and just sharing all of this fantastic storytelling wisdom.
Thank you for having me. We could have talked for 4 more hours, but I'm happy to leave it at this for now.
Yes, well, you'll have to come back. Thanks again. Well, hey there. I wanted to say thank you for tuning into my show and for listening all the way to the end. If you really enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, and you'll get new episodes downloaded as soon as they come out. I would love if you left me a rating or a review, because this tells other people that my podcast is worth listening to. And then me and my guests can reach even more earbuds and create even more impact. So that's pretty much it. I'll be back soon with a brand new episode. But until then, you can find me on Instagram at JuliaCampbell77. Keep changing the world, you nonprofit unicorn.